Hi everyone, and welcome back to this season, which is season 2 of Learn with Graveloholic. And today we're going to talk about this.
It is fortunate. I guess sometimes and this is going to sound bad, but I almost see it as like a curse. Cool, I can like sit on the kicker bike and just listen to this call, and if I need to take notes, I've got the desk so I can just type some notes.
You're only 33, man. Come
Yeah, I
on.
know, I know. But I guess at some point, like just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yes, that was Ian Boswell. He has made a name of himself within the gravel community quite fast, with winning Unbound Gravel as like one of the first ever thing that he did on a gravel bike. Of course, he is an ex-pro. He used to ride for Katusha, but more famously Team Sky, which was one of the best teams of its time. I'm truly honored to talk to Ian. He has so much insight and so great knowledge about what's going on in the business of cycling. But hey, let's get this show going. Here is Ian Boswell. Welcome, Ian. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I just had a nice weekend and some snow on the ground outside. I guess it's still winter time here in Vermont, but it's starting to feel like yeah, the days are slowly getting longer, which is always a nice feeling.
I I stalked you a little bit, and I was looking through your Instagram earlier today just to prepare a little bit for this interview, which I'm very nervous to do, but I'm super happy to have you. Super excited about that. But just the question about Vermont. Usually, you have a lot of snow there, right?
Yeah, I mean we're pretty far north as far as like latitude. Our elevation isn't that high. But yeah, I mean, it seems like the last couple of winters we haven't had any big storms. I guess we keep getting like a big like dump of snow. I guess the other day we had like 13 inches, which is what, like, I don't know, 30 centimeters. But then the next day it was 5 degrees Celsius and raining, so it all disappears. So we keep getting snow; it just doesn't stay around long.
Okay,
But yeah,
okay,
we've got a cold spell coming, so the snow that we have should stay on the ground.
awesome. So the common denominator that you and me have, and how I was able to connect with you is basically through Wahoo. So thank you very much to Wahoo, and this is just a super amazing opportunity to speak to you about some of those things. But I would like to start with, I mean, you ride a bike, I ride a bike, but why do you ride a bike, and how did you get started riding a bike from the get go?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I mean, I think a lot of, I mean, every kid wants to ride a bike. I think it's like a mile marker. I think in every kid's life when you first learn how to ride a bike. And obviously, it's a really easy, well, a fairly easy thing for most kids to like have access to at a young age. Kids bikes, there's plenty of them. A kid down the street outgrows a bike and all of a sudden it fits you, and then you try to learn how to ride a bike, and everyone remembers their first big crash, or you know going off their first jump. I think it's like the first time in your life as a kid when you really get to like experience that freedom of pure independence. You can go where you want, you can turn when you want to turn. You get to feel the wind in your face, you get to like feel the breathing hard the faster you go. So I learned how to ride a bike. Actually, it wasn't until pretty late. I wasn't. Now kids have those little Strider bikes where they learn how to ride their bike at 2 or 3 years old. I didn't learn how to ride until I was 7. I think that's just because kids of my age, and I'm sure for yourself, everyone learns how to ride on training wheels. So you learn how to ride your bike kind of leaning off to one side, as the training wheels slowly
Exactly.
bending. But once I knew how to ride my bike, it was like that I was hooked. I was fortunate that both my parents did endurance sports, mountain bike racing and triathlon. So once I was able to ride, my parents were able to kind of, I guess, guide me as far as like, cool, like we can race BMX, or there's, once I got big enough, you could do some road racing or mountain bike racing. So it wasn't like a huge stretch for me to kind of enter the sport of cycling. And through kind of my high school years, I played, the traditional American sports as well, football and or American football and basketball, and did some cross country running and cross country skiing. But cycling was the sport that I did well in at a young age. But I think also I enjoyed it so much because it was very much my own pursuit. When you play team sports, which are huge in the U.S., you can practice by yourself, but ultimately, you can only practice when the team is, well, I mean, you can go play basketball by yourself, but it's not the same as, cycling is like very much a sport that you can get better on your own. Um, and put in more work if you want to. I just remember like coming home from school and being like, cool, like if I run home from the bus, I'll be home 5 minutes quicker, and I can get my cycling kit on, and I can, go out and do an hour and a half ride before it gets dark. Um, and I think just that process of like, it's very much a sport that you can like track your progress. You can almost kind of, especially when you're first starting, or, after a long, break off the bike, it's like every day you feel and can kind of see the progress that you're making. And I think that like, even to this day, having raced from age, I guess probably 7 or 8 was when I did my first BMX race until, I'm almost 33. I think more than anything, it's still that like process of like improving, and also just like that, I think any of us who ride a bike to a, I guess somewhat, harder degree, like when you get back from a ride, it's such a good feeling, when you're hungry and you stumble in and you're like, oh, what's in the refrigerator? And, it really gets your mind and your body kind of like, all the juices flowing. And I think oftentimes like the best, I'm usually in the best mood of, of the day after I get off my bike.
Yeah, no, I can definitely speak to that as well. Coming back to it's funny what you say that with the training wheels. I do remember the day that I was able to take off the training wheels. And that's a very, very early memory for me, and I must have been, I don't remember exactly, but 4 or 5 years old or something. And I remember how proud I was, because I was at like kindergarten or something like that, in compare, I don't know what it was called back then, but and my parents came to pick me up, and I was like showing them for the first time that I was able to ride by myself without
Yeah.
those wheels. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Uh, but hey, you have a daughter, right, Ingrid?
Yes.
And she's how old now?
She is just over 2 years old.
Oh, cool. My middle one is almost 3 in March, but we gave him one of those strider bikes that you talked about last year. Has Ingrid started already?
She's had one. And this summer, like we have a little, like they call it like a little shotgun seat that we ride her on our bike
Oh,
between
yeah, yeah,
our
yeah.
bar and stem, and she loves that. She didn't really want to ride her bike, during the summertime here. But then of course, now that it's wintertime and we're kind of stuck inside, she like runs it all around the house. So
Oh,
I think this year, once the snow melts, she'll be excited to go out and push it around the driveway.
oh, that's cool. I've been looking at one of those shotgun seats as well. I've actually done it on my drop bar bike. I just
Oh
put some
wow.
padding on the top tube, and my boy, who was holding onto the handlebar and rode with me, just a
Yeah.
short one, or a couple of times we've done it, but he loves it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the actual, I forget the name of the company. It might, maybe it's not maybe it is Shotgun Seat. I don't know. It's a Canadian company, but
Mhm.
the kids love it. I saw Ted King had one, and so
Exactly.
when Ingrid was born, we got some actually people at Wahoo got it as a gift for us. It's like a, yeah, a baby gift. And Ingrid, like in the springtime and summer and autumn, like every day, that's how she goes to school, is on her little shotgun bike. And yeah, she absolutely loves it, because she still gets the balance, and she gets to hold the handlebar, so she feels things turning. And
Yeah.
um it's just so much fun to ride around with her on that.
Exactly. But I remember when I looked at it, there was something you couldn't do it on the drop bar bikes, or something. It was more for mountain bikes. So I guess I need to get a mountain bike as well or something.
We put on the drop bar bike. Yeah, we have it.
Oh, you
Actually,
did?
my wife actually has it on. We both put it on our Diverge, or our, I have it on my Diverge. She has it on her Crux, which is like a different, has the future shock, so it's a different
Yeah.
spacer. But I took a little tool and like drilled it out to to make it fit. So it's, I don't know how safe it is, but I think she's light enough still. There hasn't been any cracks.
Awesome. That's so cool. But hey, you spent quite some years in the pro peloton, right? And the last couple of years, you spent 4 years with Team Sky. You spent 2 years with Katusha, and then you retire at 31. That's pretty early, isn't it? Or is that
Yeah,
me?
yeah. So I mean, I as I was saying, kind of bike racing was my my passion, and then it became my job. But yeah, I raced at, I guess through some domestic American teams, and then in 2013 joined Team Sky. I was there for 5 years, and then Katusha for 2. And in the spring of 2019, I had a bad crash at Tirreno Adriatico, and had another concussion. Throughout my whole professional road career, I managed to not break any bones, but hit my head a lot on the pavement when I did crash. So yeah, it was a pretty bad concussion in the spring, and didn't actually wind up racing for the rest of the year. I had the opportunity to continue racing if I wanted to. There were other teams I could have joined. Um, I may have even been younger. I might have been 28, 29 back then. But I kind of, spent the whole summer just like, first doing physical therapy and rehab and
Mm.
just kind of getting, to the point where cool, like, where am I going to be regardless of racing or not? Where am I going to land on my feet? And what does that look like? I was able to start riding again. And then once I started riding again, it was kind of a long internal dialogue of, do I want to race bikes again? And do I want to race road bikes again? And there's so much more to cycling, as you know, than just racing at the World Tour. And I think for the longest time, for me, bike riding was professional road racing. That's kind of all I saw. It's like, oh, why would you go ride your bike why would I take my, daughter to school on bike? I can drive her, because I got to save my
Mm.
legs because I got to be ready for, training or a bike race. You kind of had a very narrow vision of what bike riding was. And it was, the purpose of bike riding is to get, faster and stronger for bike racing. And through that summer, I really kind of fell back in love with bike riding where, it became much more social. When I was professionally on the road, it was very social. I was riding with other people, but those other people were professional cyclists, so it was like, cool, we're going to ride and we'll stop at a coffee shop, but then we're going to go do a climb. Everyone's going to do their intervals. And, the network of people you see is very insular. But, just through that summer of 2019, coming back to Vermont and riding bikes with friends or, doing local kind of, Tuesday night fun rides or going mountain biking or going on my fat bike, it really reminded me that bike riding is so much bigger than just racing.
Mm.
And there's so much beauty and joy just in, as I was saying, coming back from a ride with friends, like, oh, I was just, where'd you guys go? We explored, went on these new roads, and we took our gravel bikes on mountain bike trails, or we took our fat bikes across a lake, all these like things that I didn't avoid, but I just didn't do when I was racing on the road because I was so focused on the training and, getting the workouts done. And so just throughout that summer of 2019, I decided, maybe it's time for me to, walk, step away from professional road racing and try something different. And that's when I decided, yeah, I'm not going to go back to pro road racing, which is a big decision, but also something that I got to choose myself. I guess there was also the realization that if I go back to pro road cycling, I probably am going to crash again. I mean, we've seen since then, how many big crashes there are in, Paris-Nice, the
Yeah,
Tour de
and
France. I
even
mean,
in the
every
big
race there's,
facilities, right? It's horrible.
yeah. Yeah. And that's just part of it. I guess I knew I was going to, I was guaranteed to crash again if I went back to pro racing. Would I hit my head again? I don't know. But given my track record of, hanging onto my handlebars and not breaking a collarbone, but hitting my head, it was pretty high.
Mm.
Um, so I think just my acceptance of risk became lower. I wasn't willing to risk as much, and I think it's very true in professional sports in general. Once you start to think about the risk, like you're kind of out of the game. You
Yeah.
can't be going down you can't be going down a pass in the Alps and thinking, oh, what if I crash right now? Because no one ahead of you or behind you is thinking about that. And if you touch your brakes a little bit too much, then there's a gap and you're never gonna close it. And in fairness to professional cyclists, teams can find someone who is willing to go down that descent at full speed and not think about it. And I think I'd
But
also oh, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say this thing with crashing. I mean, now we're gonna get into that as well with the gravel cycling, right? That you stepped into very successfully, but that's not really un. It's not really safe there either, right? I've myself, I haven't raced that much, but those times that have raced, I've seen some pretty bad crashes, and we've seen like your colleagues over there, Ted King, he crashed a couple of times, he injured himself pretty bad, and Pacey McElveen and so forth. So where are you? Do you see that differently from the pro peloton, or
Yeah, yeah, and that's it's kind of ironic that I say like, oh, bike racing is dangerous, but yet I'm still bike racing.
yeah?
And that's true. Bike racing, bike riding is dangerous. I guess life is inherently dangerous. I guess what I've found in gravel up to this point, it does become every year it becomes more competitive. People are taking more risk. Um, I guess what I've found is that because the sport of gravel racing is still relatively new and it's kind of it's still kind of being discovered. Um, and for me, gravel racing isn't about being the best gravel cyclist. It isn't about winning every race I go to. It's very much like, cool, these races are fun, and if I have a good day and I'm feeling well and the course suits me, like, cool, I can do well.
Mm,
But I'm not at a point mentally where it's like, cool, I'm willing to like risk going into this corner at full speed because, if I lose this wheel, I'm going to get dropped.
Got you.
Um, and so I guess because, I mean, to be fair, like the level of gravel racing is much lower than professional road racing. Every year it's becoming more competitive. It is becoming faster, but overall, just given, kind of my ability, I'm able to like, cool, I'm going to go slower down this descent and I'll catch him at the bottom, or I'll catch him on the next climb, or, I'm going to go my speed. There's 8 of us in the front group versus, 150 of us. And it's like, cool, I can just go to the back and like, take my speed. And yes, there's times when I'm going faster than I want to, but I'm not necessarily forced to go as fast as, or fast enough where I feel uncomfortable. And I
Mm.
think, every year that's going to become, the speed of the front racers is going to become faster. And I guess I'm about to have another kid here in the next 2 weeks. And once you have 2 kids, it's like, I think my risk level is going to go even down more, where it's like, oh, I don't even know if I want to go down this hill. But I think just for the moment, I've been able to like kind of dictate the level of risk that I want to take.
Yeah. No,
And I guess, yeah, it's like I said, it's not, I'm not in a position anymore where I find myself thinking like, okay, I have to go down this speed or else I'm going to lose my job or the team's not going to take me to the next race. It's like, well, whether it's Wahoo or Specialized or SRAM,
yeah.
if I don't win, it's not like they're going to, I don't lose my
No,
job.
I understand the difference. I understand
Yeah.
the difference. There is differences, definitely the way that you express it. I completely agree.
Yeah.
But I just want to circle back to something that you spoke about earlier. This whole thing about it's not about the racing, is more about and the cycling, and the cycling is such a big thing. It's just more than racing itself. You spoke about in a in a reel that you made, maybe it was 1 or 2 years ago or something, that also I think it was coming back to Unbound after your win, about and you spoke about exactly this as well, but you use different words about it's more about the journey and not about ending up on podiums and stuff like that. Was that your ambition when you retired? Did you ever think about that you want to become sort of an inspiration for people and spread the message about cycling, or has that just naturally evolved with you now? Or
I mean, not at all. I mean, I guess when I left the world tour and my contract ended at the end of December in 2019, January 1st, I started with Wahoo working, a normal job. And I was like, cool, like, I'm a new chapter of life. I still like bikes. I'm working in the industry, so I'll still ride bikes. At the time, gravel racing was becoming more popular, and Wahoo as a brand attends a lot of events. So, they're like, hey, we're going to be at Unbound anyways. You might as well race. You might as well, participate because, during the middle of the day when the race is going on, like there's no expo, like everyone's just standing around. So I didn't enter this gravel scene like expecting to be like a racer or to win the biggest races. I mean, really at all. And I guess, sometimes I fail to recognize that I do have like, a past of pro racing where like I have this, ability to like train and then like do well. Um, Equally the fact that like, cool, if I do something, it inspires people. It's still funny when, when we're shooting a Frontiers film where, I've got workouts on Wahoo system and people like, oh, I just love, doing that week of training with you. I'm like, people actually watch this? I mean, even same with the podcast. I mean, it's similar to, you meet someone, at a bike event or someone like, oh, I love your podcast, or oh, how's your puppy doing? I'm like, how do you know my dog? But like they see you on Instagram. I mean, it's still a weird experience when
yeah,
people follow you, and that people like, take inspiration from you. And I do it from other people, whether it's different sporting stars and, outside of cycling, but you find inspiration. Um, it's still weird to like realize that like people watch what I do and like, oh, like, I'm going to get into gravel racing because I saw Ian's doing it. It's still something you don't always like see you don't always see the direct result of it, but you understand it's there, but it's like not until you meet the people that you realize that you have, in some ways, you've enhanced people's life because they've, signed up for a bike event, or they've started training, or they've, made healthier choices because they found the bike because of you.
do you see yourself as an influencer?
Um, I mean, not really. I mean, I guess I can't deny I do have, I'm sure, influence. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I guess I don't necessarily see myself as an influencer. and I guess my social media, it's like I kind of just put out what I want. I don't think about it a lot. My wife, half the time I put out an Instagram, she texts me and said, "Hey, you spelt this wrong." Or I'm like, "Oh, I was just like, I was like doing something else and I posted this picture and I wrote something, but I didn't, check it." And, she's like, "Yeah, you spelt these things way wrong. Or you need a comma here, or you need some punctuation." But yeah, I mean, I guess it's, in a way I do have, influence, and I do, represent brands that I guess I have relationships with. So yes, there is, I guess, probably a degree of, influence that I carry,
Yeah, yeah.
um, which
I mean,
is, yeah, it's
there's a
interesting.
negative connotation to that for some people at least, like being
Yeah.
an influencer. But I get your point. I think you're definitely a true source of inspiration, and I think that's what people and brands also do see with you. You have a level of authenticity as well that just goes above and beyond. I would say. Now I'm throwing a lot of sort of positive vibes on you, but
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I guess
that's
it's,
what I
it's this
see at
whole,
least, and I think it's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's a strange, I don't say strange, it's a new time in, like, I guess, in marketing and sports. I guess when I was growing up racing, there was kind of like one way to the top, and that was like to get good results. Every time you got a good result, maybe you got a bigger team, or you got another opportunity with, go to a bigger race. And like, yes, that's still very much like the ladder of, pro road cycling. But when you look at sport more broadly, yes, we do live in an era where you have, influencers. I guess a big cycling influencer would be, Phil Guyman. He's
Mhm.
a cyclist that doesn't even race anymore. But he has tremendous amount of, following and engagement and like influence over, what people choose, what equipment they buy or where they go do cycling trips, because he, is sharing his experience with other people. And I guess, yes, there is sometimes like a negative connotation with influencer, but I also feel like one thing I've really enjoyed with kind of this current chapter of my life is the ability to like share my knowledge. And I feel like that is one thing that social media has been great for, whether
Mm.
it's, equipment choices that I'm making or why I'm making them, or, training questions that I'm happy to share, or, cool, I went and rode this, I was in Mexico in November, and I, put together some social media around that, and people are like, "Oh, wow, I never thought about going to Mexico to ride a bike." I'm like, "Yeah, it's great." And so you are kind of in a way exposed to more, more different viewpoints, which is great.
Yeah, you've done some amazing trips, huh? You've been all over the world, and soon you're going to where was it? You're going to I
To
wrote it down
Chile.
somewhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Was it in February,
Yeah.
March?
Early
Patagonia.
March. Yeah. Patagonia. Yeah. And it's,
You need to tell me about this. I want to know more.
yeah, it's ironically, it's actually like I mean, I've never been to Antarctica, but South America is like a continent I've never been to. I've done stuff in Asia, I've done stuff in, I've been to Russia and all over Europe and, Australia, but I've never been to South America. So yeah, there's an organization called the Fireflies, which raises money for mostly like, rare blood cancers and leukemia, and they do rides around the world. It started in the UK, and they were, kind of doing stuff around the Tour de France, these charity events. But they have a ride in Patagonia, I think 8 days, and it looks crazy. I mean, I've just seen a few pictures of it, and it looks so stunning, and it's very rugged. We're really far out there. And I've tried
What
to get
bike
some
you're
information.
bringing?
I will bring my STR, the
Yeah,
Diverge. Yeah, I mean, from what I,
with the suspension in the back, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, because I mean, it's not necessarily bike packing. I think we are going to be staying at, whether it's, school gyms or, hostels or, little inns. Um, but because the days are long enough, I'm going to load the bike up with some, bike bags, and I'm actually bringing a little fly fishing pole because I hear the fly fishing's great. So like, stop in the middle of the day and do a little bit of fishing. But yeah, it's an 8 day bike pack trip. Yeah, to raise money for the Fireflies organization, which is, an organization that donates money to cancer research for leukemia. And from what I've found, people are going to come from all over the world. A lot of British folks, some folks from South America, some Americans. So I'm looking forward to it. You really get to meet people,
yeah.
in a deeper sense on a bike trip.
But you do quite a few of these things, like with Best Buddies now, Fireflies, and etc. But where does that come from, and how? Why do you do it?
I mean, I guess it's hard for me to say no to opportunities. and I think, I mean, you probably discovered this as well. The bike is oftentimes the best place to connect with people. The conversations you have on a bike, and I don't know if it's because, you have your heart's pumping, you're, breathing a little bit, but you're also like, your mind kind of expands when you ride a bike. You think about different ideas and you kind of speak more freely and more, openly, but also you're not making direct eye contact. So you can kind of just, you just start talking and people are listening, and you're, next thing you know, you're laughing, or you're, sharing a story that you wouldn't share if you were just sitting at a bar or, a coffee shop across from a table with someone. Um, and so I guess oftentimes I'm invited to some of these events. The Best Buddies event, they brought in a number of, pro riders, or kind of, past ex-pro riders, to help kind of guide the charity ride. So there's 50 or 60 people who attend the ride as, donors of the Best Buddies organization. And then, they bring in 8 or 10 of us, ex-pro riders to be like, hey, you guys can, like, help, guide the ride. You can be out there encouraging people. I guess everyone who shows up to the ride is a cyclist. So they're like, oh, cool. It's great to be able to ride with these pro riders.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy that. I mean, it's something that I really, like I said, it's weird for me to like be there, like, oh, why Chris Froome's here and I'm here? Like, I mean, I see Chris Froome as like a much, more accomplished cyclist than I am, but yet, people still like admire what I did in my career, which, you know, in my mind, I'm just me, but, to someone else, you're like, oh, you did the Tour de France, or you won Unbound, which is for me, it's just what I did. But for other people, it's, as you said, it can be inspiring.
It truly is. I mean, it definitely is. I want to ask you about. I mean, coming back to what I said, the common denominator for us was, or is, Wahoo, right? And nowadays, this time of year, right now, it's, what is it, 14th of, it's even 15th of January, and it's basically snowing outside my window right here now as well. And I've been on my kicker quite a lot, and basically more than I would like to, because I like to ride outdoors. But then
Yeah.
with the time with family and everything, it's just difficult to make that, because it takes time to get dressed. You need to clean the bike, blah blah. Blah. But speaking about the Wahoo products, you have probably tested and used a lot of them, right?
Mhm.
What's your favorite? What's your approach to indoor training and cycling?
Yeah, I mean, I'm as you said, I'm fortunate to work here, so I get, either a good deal, or I get, products that, refurbished products that have come back. The new Kicker Move is awesome, just the comfort of it. I personally have the V1 Kicker bike in my basement, which, I spend actually a lot of time riding inside, just with Vermont winters.
Yeah.
Um, and it's definitely, it's a higher price point item, but for me, it just makes riding inside so convenient. I did a ride this morning. I woke up, I made some coffee. My wife took our daughter to school. It was, 40 minutes before we were going to meet up for a call. I'm like, cool. I put bib shorts on, an undershirt. My shoes are already down there, flip the switch. And I'm like, 3 minutes later, I'm on the bike riding, and did, a 20-minute ride. So it's super convenient. I think, the same as you said, it eliminates, cool, I rode my bike outside, now it's dirty, and to get to our basement, I have to bring everything through the house. So it's like, then you're bringing a dirty bike through the house, and like, because the bike is already set up in the basement, it's just like, it's there, it's ready to go. Um, it kind of gives me no excuse to not ride. I mean, I do have a bit of a sore knee at the moment, so I've been like, taking it easy, but it makes
Oh,
it easy, just to like, jump on, in the morning before work, in the evening after work, once our daughter
yeah.
goes to bed. Sometimes in the middle of the day we have, calls where you're kind of just listening, someone's going through a presentation. It's like, cool, I can like sit on the Kicker bike and just listen to this call. And if I need to take notes, I've got the desk, so I can just, type some notes.
Oh, you do that?
I mean, if I don't need to talk, yeah, I mean, we have
I
like,
might have to try that.
yeah. Um, which is like great. It's like, of course I'm not going to do like a hard interval session, so I can,
No,
can't
obviously.
focus.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it just made indoor riding so much more convenient compared to, you know, what it used to be, and especially now with whether you're riding on Zwift, or, I actually do a lot of stuff on the Wahoo system app, the workouts, just because oftentimes I know how much time I have. Cool. This morning I was like, I've got 20 minutes. I can just like sort the workouts by time. I wanted something easier because my knee's a little bit sore. So I was like, cool, here's a little 20-minute kind of warm up activation workout, you know, select. And then next thing you know, I'm not even shifting gears. It's doing everything for me. So I
Yeah.
can, watch Netflix or a YouTube video and kind of just space out and, just keep pedaling.
I mean, I have tested a lot of different platforms, right? I do miss RGT, to be honest, and
Yeah.
System is definitely my favorite. I mean, I'm not saying this because of Wahoo. I'm just that is my favorite. Also because there are other platforms out there that I have a feeling that they just pad the numbers uh, for people
Yeah.
to. And maybe I'm a little bit too honest and explicit here, but I think that people ride there just because they want to sort of have as much kilometers or whatever miles ridden, and
Yeah.
the trueness to those figures and that data is just not there. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and I mean, I guess when System kind of started off, it used to be Sufferfest, which,
Yeah.
is what it sounds like. It's like, cool, you've got an hour. How can you get the most out of that hour? And there's obviously easier workouts now in System. But there's like some workouts you go on in an hour and you can be toast. You can like really
Yeah.
tire yourself out in an hour, which is, oftentimes like like a lot of people, I'm not someone who can sit on the bike inside and ride for 3 hours. It's like, cool. Like if I'm motivated, I can do like an hour in the morning and an hour at night. And I'm like super happy with that. So, but if I make those 2 hours, specific and harder workouts, it's like, that's all I need to do as well. You can get really fit off of, 60 to 90 minutes a day of specific indoor riding.
I need to come back to your basement, your pain cave.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that when I speak to you being sort of authentic, like you showing off your basement, like there you see pictures of people they're trying to be super sort of flashy with their pain caves. They paint the walls, they put up pictures, they make this awesome. They have LED lights like I have back right here back and stuff like
Yeah.
that to make it look. Your basement is a basement, right?
It's like a cellar. Yeah, I mean, there's mouse traps around my kicker bike because we have mice down there, and it's pretty. I mean, I would say it's kind of gross. But yeah, there's pipes above the ceiling and cobwebs, and it's like the one. We live in an old farmhouse, so every floor in the house is crooked. In our basement, there's like one slab of concrete, and it's the most flat spot in the whole house, and even it's still not flat. So in the front of my kicker bike, I have a little block of wood to make it
Okay.
level. Um, but yeah, it's also because our house is old and the floors are slanted. It's also, if I go down to the basement, it's quiet. No one can hear me upstairs. If I put the kicker bike, in the middle floor or up above us, you know, the whole house, because it's just a thin old house. The whole house hears me, riding my bike or playing music too loud or watching a movie. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess it's like you might as well suffer somewhere that feels like you're suffering. It's also nice and cool in our basement. That's another big thing. Is it stays cold down there.
Yeah, that's definitely. I was going to ask you about that. What the temperature is down like that down there?
Oh, it's probably 4 or 5 degrees. So
Yeah,
perfect for indoor riding. Yeah.
yeah. What? Let's come back to Unbound, right? That was a huge thing. Unbound is probably the biggest, the most famous gravel race in the world, and you come in, was it 2021 as a
Yeah.
rookie, and you win, sprinting Lawrence Tandem, and you after whatever 7 hours or so,
10
and you
hours.
win it.
Yeah.
How how's that even possible? I mean, and how? Yeah, I have tons of follow-up questions for
Yeah.
that, but
I mean, I guess as I said, it's kind of, I mean, for me, it's still strange, not strange that I won. But, at the time there were plenty of riders who they were still racing at you know, living this professional lifestyle, someone like Pete Stetno or Lawrence Tandam or, even Ted King, who else was in that front group, Colin Strickland, people who were, I think Quinn Simmons was there that year, Keel Reinen, they were still professional riders on the road. Um, I think also I had really low, I don't say low expectations, but I was like, cool, this is like a 10-hour event. I had no experience with, tire plugs or, kind of gravel races in general. So I was like, this is a great opportunity to get some experience. If nothing else, it's a long bike ride that's, something like I've never done before. So I think just because I wasn't like on the start line thinking, oh, how can I win? Or I need to win this. I was just kind of going with the flow. There were times when we hit a technical section, and because I didn't want to take risk, there was 200 people up the road, and I was, back with with the amateurs, like, oh, cool, let's get down this hill safely, because I just was like, I don't want to flat. I don't want to destroy my bike or crash. But but, kind of racing my race rather than like trying to race the people in the front. And, slowly the group got smaller, and, we kind of came back together. And it was just like a fun bike ride with friends. At one point, well, I guess after halfway, it was just five of us in the front group, and I knew everyone in the front group. And, Unbound's unique in the sense that it's such a big event, but so much of it is kind of by, not necessarily by yourself, but with this small group of people. You're out there in these
Mm.
roads and you don't see anyone, just the people you're rotating with. And it was, four people I knew fairly well. And then the next thing, you come back into town with, I was coming back in with Tendam, like, oh shoot, this is a bike race, because it's so long, like, it's not like a road race where there's like attacking and there's helicopters and there's, team cars and radios. It's like, cool, there's just five of us. We're just, doing a pace line out in the middle of Kansas. It's like a fun adventure. And then all of a sudden, you come back into Emporia and you're like, oh, well, I forgot where, like, I mean, you remember it's a bike race, but you don't realize that like people are watching this, and, it's people around the globe are like, seeing where, what the race results are going to be. You're following, a live stream. So to win was like cool. It's also kind of funny because it's like so much of it for me was still just like a bike ride. And, cool, I did a sprint at the end and I beat Tendam, but, had the sprint been, another kilometer later or a kilometer earlier, maybe he wins, and then no one
Yeah.
cares that I was second. So it's, I mean, it kind of brings like sport back into perspective for me, that it's such a funny, we celebrate so much the person who wins, but yet there's so many other stories that take place out there. And I think that's what's kind of cool to me is, with the gravel events, yes, you have the pro and the elite field racing, but like, you hang out at the finish line after and everyone's got a story, which, in professional racing, like people just care about one story and that's kind of it. And with gravel racing, there's, thousands of stories.
Yeah, and people create their own stories, as you say. I love that
Yes.
as well. And you've been very supportive of that. You've done that a couple of times, right? Where you head out on the e-bike on the and
Yeah.
help and support people. There was, I don't remember which race it was, you were out and you posted so many nice, great stories about the people that you met and that you helped.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done that the last 2 years at SBT gravel. I'll probably do it again. It's like one of the most fun things I do on the bike every year is, I start 10 minutes after the last person rolls across the start line, and then I just ride, and I've got panniers and I've got
Yeah.
tools and tubes and snacks and sunscreen. Um, because as gravel grows, there's a lot of people who participate who are, yes, they've trained for it, but, you know, they've never changed broken a chain, or they've never put an inner tube in, or, a cable breaks on their bike. They don't necessarily have the experience of, I'm not a mechanic, but, I have basic mechanical skills. And it's like to be able to help someone just make it to the finish, cool, we got your chain fixed, or someone drops a chain, or, people keep pinching a tube and they had 3 tubes and they've blown them all up because it's, tucked in the tire wrong. So to be able to help people like get to the finish line it's really cool, because
But all those
people
people,
spend.
they were so happy. Was there anyone that you edited out that wasn't sort of that was frustrated or anything, or was really everyone so purely happy that you met?
Most people were happy. There was one gentleman, I guess this was last year in 20, well, I guess 2 years ago now, in 2022. Um, he had traveled from the UK, and he, packed his bike and took his fork out. And then when he reassembled it, he put the headset bearings in upside down. And
Ooh.
so, when he tightened it, they broke, and he was, I don't know, 50 kilometers into the ride, and he had a lot of like play in his headset. And so I
Mm.
was like, oh, cool, I can tighten your headset. I know how to fix this. And then I took the stem off and the stem cap, and I was like, oh, like this is not safe. And he's like, oh, well, I'll just ride to the finish. I'm like, if you keep riding, you're going to like break your bike and you might end up in the hospital. So I waited with him until we got a car to take him back to town. So he wasn't happy, but I guess I was happy that like I was the one that saw that and not someone else.
Mm.
Was like, oh yeah, you'll be fine, because then next thing you know, on a downhill, he, his stem locks up, or the fork breaks out of the race, and then the next thing you know, you're on the ground. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's a bummer when you see that happen, because people spend a lot of money and time. This gentleman this was his big trip of the year, to come from the UK to Colorado to do this event. It's not cheap to, sign up, and hotels and equipment. So it's a bummer to see, someone not be able to finish, but I guess the reward is like helping other people who otherwise wouldn't be able to finish, get to the finish for oftentimes a simple fix of a tube, or a multi-tool that you can fix a
Yeah.
chain.
No, I love to see that side of the field as well. So the yeah, the the ones that's not only at the pointy part of the race, but also the ones that's in the back, and how happy they were. That made my day. I just smiled so much when I saw all that. It was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of it, and that's kind of, I guess, my maybe maturity in the sport is like realizing that most people are just there riding, at Unbound, there's what, 4,000 riders. There's, maybe 180 professional men and maybe, 100 professional women. And then there's, 3,700 people who are just going to have a fun bike ride with friends. And I think sometimes we forget that, especially as the media attention on the racing becomes so much bigger. We
Yeah,
forget that people are just out there having a good time. And that's kind of, those stories are oftentimes more inspiring than, Keegan winning his 10th, race of the season.
yeah. But uh, do you consider yourself fortunate? And let me expand on that. Because right from what I see, you have the capability of winning races, winning those races that people solely try to do everything they can to win. I mean, there's people like Keegan, for example. He puts in a lot of time and effort, right? And he wins a lot of things as well. But on the other hand, it seems like you have reached also a point of your career where you have other mechanisms that supports you in financially, and also you don't from your risk assessment thinking and everything. But you're in sort of that sweet spot of a Venn diagram where you have that security. You don't need to race for the win, but you can if you want to. Kind of as you said in the earlier today, if you have a good day, you're in that sweet spot of the Venn diagram. So, have you thought about that? Do you see yourself as fortunate being there, or how?
Yeah,
Do
it's
you
something
understand where I'm
actually.
coming from?
Yeah, it's something I think about a lot. It is fortunate. I guess sometimes and this is going to sound bad, but I almost see it as like a curse.
Mm,
It's that I can still do it. If I went to, like, because there's so many things in my life that I'm, doing outside of cycling. I'm working, I'm on the volunteer fire department. I've got, one kid, another kid on the way. We've got a garden. We've got there's all these things I want to do. Um, everything takes time. And, when I look at the bike racing side, like, if I went to Unbound last year and I tried as hard as I could, given, the time I have available, and I finished, 150th place, it becomes very clear to me, like, okay, it's probably not me. It's not worth me still investing time in bike racing. I'm not competitive. I can go ride and still have fun, but I don't need to do that extra hour to be fast. But because I'm still able to be in that front group at the end of Unbound, it's like, well, shit, I guess I can still do it. It's not like in a bad, I mean, because I'm fortunate to be able to do that. But it means like, okay, well, I guess, maybe we're not going to plant as big of a garden because, I need to train a bit more because I'm still capable of, um, performing at a high level, which is, yes, it's fun. But it's like, at what point do you, and I guess part of it is also knowing that time is against me. The older you get, the reality is you're going to slow down. I'm not going to be in the front group of Unbound when I'm 50 years old. So it's like this kind of balance between like the time that I have left of being competitive, having the ability to still do that, but also like what am I willing to sacrifice? Because every year, as I was saying, the races get faster, like more is just required to be competitive, and
mm.
like every year I'm like pushing my parameters of like time I want to allow for training. Like every year it's like, oh, I guess I need to do a bit more, I guess I but it's like that time becomes more valuable. So it's, yes, I'm incredibly fortunate, but also sometimes it's like, oh, I guess I'm still good enough to do this, so I don't have to do it, but like I feel like it's almost a waste to not do it.
Yeah.
um
Well, how do you
and
strike that balance then? How do you reason? Do you reason with yourself, or do you reason with your wife, your friends? How do you make those choices for yourself?
oh, it's, I don't, I mean, I guess I'm just like constantly jumping from thing to thing. I'm working, I'm, going to the basement to ride. It's like I'm kind of in this, I feel like I'm a, someone in the circus, and I've got like 10 plates on my fingers, and I'm kind of like one plate's about to fall, and I'm like trying to balance everything. Um, but I guess I reason with it because, for my wife and I, it's kind of the life that I've been living since we met. So it's not like
Mm.
unfamiliar for her, for me to, go for a bike ride, or, to travel to, to be gone for a week here and there. Um, but it's not easy. I mean, that's like, there's no question. There's times when I'm like, oh, maybe I should stop racing because it's hard, and I guess I know what I'm capable of if I apply myself. But, every hour you spend training, like, something is being sacrificed, whether that's, putting my daughter to sleep at night, or whether that's, missing a fire call because I'm, in Texas training, or, whatever it is, like, there's something's giving somewhere else.
Yeah, I know. There
Yeah.
was I can totally relate to that. Not in the same manner, of course, because I don't have the same capability as you, but there was a woman some many years ago, and she said something about, like, don't try to make all the life puzzle pieces fit together, because
Yeah.
they never will. There will always be an unbalance. So
Yeah.
stop sort of trying to chase that balance.
Yeah.
And I thought that is so true. I mean, you can strive to have a balance and try to sort of do the sacrifices one towards the other, but having a perfect balance, there's no such thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's also compounded by the fact that, we had a pandemic, which, like, allowed me the time to, like, do all
Mhm.
these other things, to start all these other
Yeah.
kind of hobbies. And then, the world went kind of back to normal. It's like, oh, well, now I'm doing all these things that I was doing there in the pandemic. Oh, now I need to travel. Okay, now we have a kid. And it's like, like, you're just hanging on to, things that brought you happiness, and try to make them last. But, inevitably, like, as you said, everything changes, and that balance is constantly kind of
Yeah.
shifting.
I listened to Ted King the other day, and his latest AMA podcast, and he was revealing the big thing this year, that he was going to now go kind of all in, and he got himself a coach, and now he was training sort of not only by his own sort of head and thoughts, but also someone actually giving him schedule and whatnot. But and that's where are you with those things right now? Are you just taking it as it comes, or do you have a training plan now? And what's your plan for 2024?
No training plan, no coach. Yeah, I'm pretty close with Ted. He lives in Vermont as well, and I he did the podcast, which I didn't listen to, but I saw he wrote a blog, and I kind of skimmed through that, and I texted him. I was like, Ted, really, this is what you're going to do? You're going to kind of go back into
Exactly.
racing? Which, part of me was like, oh, geez, well, I need to, like, get more serious. Maybe, um,
That's what you thought, or that
I mean,
was you?
initially, yeah, because, we're in a very similar, we live in the same location. We both have, well, he's already has two kids. I'm about to have two kids.
Yeah.
Um, but then, I mean, and to each their own, and I think, Ted, for the last couple of years, the sport's gotten more serious. He hasn't had, you know, and he would admit it, he hasn't had the best seasons, whether it's crashes and injuries and, just maybe a lack of, you know, performances compared to what he wants to achieve. And so I think for him, it's really a matter of, like, checking all the boxes. And if he does all these things and he still finishes 10th place, he's like, you know what, this is the best I am given, the age I'm at. Um, I guess for me, I mean, I very much, despite still trying to be a good cyclist and a fast cyclist, um, the results at this point, it's very, like, if I get a result, it's very much like a recognition of the time and energy I put in, but I don't need personally to, like, be the best anymore. And I guess I've come to the realization very much so that, like, my best days are kind of behind me. I'm not gonna go back I don't have a desire to go back to the world tour and win the, try to win the Tour de France, or, if I go back to Unbound, if I win, it's great, but it doesn't change anything for me.
You're only 33, man. Come
Yeah,
on.
I know. But I guess, at some point, like, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
No.
And I guess that
That,
it kind of goes back to this whole balance of, like, being cursed.
exactly.
It's like, at some point there has to be an end. I look at, someone like Chris Froome, or, Geraint Thomas, they've achieved so much, but when you win something big, the question everyone asks is, oh, can you do it again? But at what point does that stop?
Mm.
At what point do you say, you know what, like, that was awesome. I, achieved some tremendous, results, or, achievements, but I'm satisfied with that. And I guess very much to a degree different than Ted, because when I stopped, I thought I was done racing. When I left the world tour in 2019, I was like, well, maybe I'll do some Grand Fondos or some local events, but I wasn't expecting to be like a elite bike racer again. And I found myself back in that position, which is great, but it's also like, like how did I end up? I spent a lot of
Mm.
time, struggling with the concept of I'm no longer a pro, and then now I find myself a pro again. So it's like, how do you keep that balance of like I'm doing this because I love riding my bikes, and I want to ride my bike until I'm 70 or 80 years old, and so it's kind of constantly keeping in mind like I don't want to burn out on bike riding, and sometimes when you do too much training, when you put too much pressure and expectations, I have plenty of colleagues who I raced with in the world tour who are retired and they don't ride a bike at all anymore.
Mm.
They burnt out on it. They don't want to touch a bike. And for me, it's like I want to ride my bike, for the rest of my life, and not just race my bike for the next 3 years.
Yeah, I can understand that. So speaking of that, do you have any sort of bucket list adventures, races, things you want to do on a bike that you still sort of, yeah.
Uh, Nothing I mean, I want to do this trip to Patagonia. I'm really looking
Mhm.
forward to that. Just riding my bike in a new area. There's an event in the U.S. that you may have heard of. Have you heard of Ragbri?
Yeah.
I want to do Ragbri, which isn't a bike race. It's like a bike ride across the state of Iowa, and it's something I want to do when my daughters get older. As I want to just like take my family and like we'll get I don't know, an old tandem or something and some trailer bikes and just do this week long bike ride across Iowa. I think there's less events I want to do, but more just like family trips on a bicycle. Like maybe
Mm.
do I don't know, a bike trip across, Vermont, something like that. Just sharing, I guess, my love and like the ability of bikes with my family rather than, I've done so much, from the Tour de France to Cape Epic to Unbound to Migration Gravel Race. Um, I think I enjoy riding my bike in new spots. Oftentimes races take you to new spots, but sometimes it's hard to really explore as much when you're racing as just going somewhere to ride.
Very cool. I think I think we will end on that note because you're such an inspiration, Ian, and I truly truly think that whatever you do, you will continue to inspire people, even that you maybe not doing it super intentionally then, but as you've been speaking about, but just spreading your joy for cycling. I think that's incredible. So thank you very much
Yeah.
for coming on this show with me, and I hope that you will have a beautiful end of this day.
All right. Thank you so much, Marcus.
Thank you so much, Ian. That was super insightful. I'm truly grateful that you took your time and that you spent that with me talking to you guys about all the things that we spoke about today. Really looking forward to seeing what you're going to achieve this year, not only when it comes to your racing, but also all the other cool events that you're doing and how you're helping people. You'll catch me with my next exciting guests in a week's time. Until then, see you guys.